What's going on, guys, and welcome to another driver tier list video. Today I'm going to be doing a driver tier list for the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix. So we've finally come from the summer break and the new season, or the second half of the season, it's not a new season, is here. A couple of things to talk about before we get started. Of course, Daniel Ricciardo did not take part in this race. He was replaced by Liam Lawson after Ricciardo's crash in FP2. I believe it was, on the Friday. So Lawson took part in FP3, quali, and the race. So I've added him to the list. You can just see him down here. The picture doesn't line up with the rest, but that's because, well, he, as far as I know, I haven't actually looked. He doesn't have like a picture like these because he's not part of the normal grid, the original grid. So yeah, we've got a bit of a weird picture for him. I've also not changed, I've got Ricciardo and I've still got De Vries down the bottom there. I think once Ricciardo comes back, I will kind of redo this tier list because you can't seem to remove kind of things from these tier lists. You can only add. So once Ricciardo is back, I will redo this, get rid of Lawson, get rid of De Vries, so then we've got kind of a fresh slate again, so it looks a bit cleaner. But for now, we'll just leave Ricciardo and De Vries down the bottom here. So in alphabetical order, as we usually do it, we start with Alexander Albon, who, amazing quali, P4 in quali. What a result for him and Williams. I mean, both Williams in Q3 for the first time in a long time, so that was pretty amazing. But yeah, Albon did such a great job. In the race, he finished P8, which I actually think was a bloody good job, considering that, from what I remember, he stayed out on the soft compound tyres the whole time. He didn't change onto the intermediates in that kind of, the rain that came right at the start of the race. I think there was him and I believe it was Hulkenberg, was it? The two drivers that didn't change tyres. They didn't change onto the intermediates. They just stuck it out. He did like 45 laps or something on the softs. So considering how much quicker intermediate tyre runners were at that point in time, the fact that he still managed to come through to finish in P8, I have to give him an S. It's an amazing job. Williams had a good car this weekend, which we didn't expect. On a very high downforce track that is Zandvoort, we didn't expect. Williams didn't seem to expect that they'd have a good car here. But yeah, I mean, I think P8 is about as good as he could have done. If he hadn't have stayed out that whole on those tyres, on the dry tyres, went on to the intermediates, people say that he could have been in for a podium. I'm not sure about that, but I think a top 5. I think he could have had a top 5 finish if he did do the better strategy. But I'm not really going to put that on. I'm not going to put that on Albon. I don't know whose decision that ultimately was, but yeah, I think it's great from Albon. He's doing so good this season, and yeah, definitely showing that he belongs in F1. Next up, Fernando Alonso. It's another S. P2 for Alonso from P5 on the grid. What a result. It was almost looking like he was going to fight Max for the win after the red flag at the end of the race. He was so quick this weekend, just had amazing pace, and yeah, seemingly Aston Martin seemed to be quite a lot better again this weekend after a fairly troublesome kind of second half of the first half of the season. So yeah, great stuff from Alonso. Valtteri Bottas is the first one I have to look to my list. Finished P14. I think he qualified second to last. The only driver behind him in quali was Liam Lawson. So he was out-qualified by Zhou once again. Neither of them made it through to Q2 though. In the race, I mean, he beat Zhou, but that was because Zhou DNF'd. But I just think it was a bit of a... He had a good lap 1. Got quite a few moves done on lap 1. Pretty innocuous for the rest of the race. I think it's just a C for Bottas. There's nothing really bad. I mean, he managed to... I think he did actually go off when Zhou crashed. When he crashed, Bottas went off just after him, but managed to keep it out of the wall. So he did have his moments, but to be fair, pretty much everybody did. But yeah, very innocuous from Bottas this weekend, as is the case for a lot of the season, to be fair, for him and Alfa Romeo. Pierre Gasly, it's another S tier result. Gasly P3 on the podium, of course, because of Perez's penalty. Finished P4 on the road, but yeah, started P12. Got the intermediate tyres on at the right time, and then subsequently changed onto the dry tyres, and then back onto intermediates at the right times as well. Later on down the line, and yeah, kept the position, was fighting Sainz, kept Sainz behind, overtook Sainz at one point as well, I think. So just had really, I mean, to be fair, the Ferraris didn't seem to have great pace this weekend, but he just did a really good job. I think for me, probably the driver of the day. I think Alonso had a very good race. And I mean, of course, Verstappen, but I think if I had to give my driver of the day, I'd give it to Gasly. Really good performance by him. Awesome to have him on the podium. It's crazy that both Alpines have now been on the podium this season when I wouldn't even consider Alpine in like the top 5 teams. So that's pretty crazy. Lewis Hamilton next. So finished P6, qualified P13. Not a good quali from Hamilton. Was hounding Lando. He actually did get past Lando in the end, didn't he? I think he was fairly close behind Sainz and just couldn't quite get past him. A pretty good race from Hamilton all in all, considering he fell back to like, I think he was last, or at least like way down at the back towards the start of the race once the rain came in, because the team were a bit reluctant to change onto the intermediate tyres. To fight back through to 6 is very good. I think just because of the fight back, I've got to give him an A. I definitely think it was a missed opportunity in quali. I think it was also partly down to the team getting him to do his fast lap a bit too early. But ultimately, Russell got through and was P3. But yeah, Hamilton, I think it was a good recovery from him, especially after, falling right to the back. Nico Hülkenberg finished P12. Yeah, he got into Q2. He's just a couple of positions away from points. It's just Haas, isn't it? They're just nowhere at the moment, especially, well, really in race pace. In qualifying, they can be decent, and especially Hülkenberg, not so much Magnussen, but we'll get to that. But yeah, Hülkenberg was fine. I don't think there's really much more you can expect from the Haas. I think it is, honestly, possibly the worst car on the grid at the moment. I'm going to give him a B. I think I'm going to give him a little bit more of a step up. Very innocuous from Haas and Hülkenberg, but I think a B is fair. I think a C is being a bit too harsh. Liam Lawson now, of course, stepped in for Daniel Ricciardo and he will be in there this weekend, I guess, now, at Monza as well. Will he be there for Singapore in, 2 weeks after that? I think he probably will. But yeah, we're definitely in for Monza. And he's literally had the most difficult debut of any driver I can think of. Changing conditions all the time. The most crazy race we've had in a long time. It came through for P13. I think a brilliant job. He was pretty close to the back for a lot of the race from what I remember, but he was always there. And I mean, in that AlphaTauri, which is not a good car, I think that's a brilliant job. Honestly, I think I'm going to give Lawson an A, because to step in, only have one practice session in the rain, and then quali in very mixed conditions, the race in ridiculously mixed conditions, to come home and finish P13, just to not put it in the wall, is a miracle. So I think a great job from Lawson. Yeah, an A. I think he did an amazing job. Very excited to see what he can do in Monza. Charles Leclerc now. We get to a driver who did not have a good weekend. Yeah, he wasn't particularly great in practice. He then wasn't good in quali, crashed out in quali, and then I think he had contact with Piastri in the race and then got some floor damage. I don't know if that was from that incident or from going off on the gravel, because that happened a couple of times as well. Picked up floor damage, absolutely dropped to the bottom of the pile, and then had a bad pit stop as well. I mean, that wasn't his fault, although it was slightly, because he just kind of put it on himself to go, no, I'm coming into the pits, and Ferrari weren't ready because, Ferrari. Yeah, a weekend to forget for sure for Leclerc. I don't think the damage or the contact with Piastri wasn't, I don't think it ended up just being a racing incident. It wasn't really anyone's fault, but I think Sainz was on top of him all weekend. I don't think it's like E territory, but it's D. It's below average territory, especially for Leclerc. Not a good weekend for him. Definitely one to forget, and he's going to be wanting to have a much better weekend in Ferrari's home race of Monza in Italy next time out. Please have a good race, Leclerc. I really do hope. Maybe I don't even know what to say anymore about Ferrari. Magnussen qualified very bad. Well, I say very bad. He was in the bottom in the bottom in Q1, out in Q1. Started in the pit lane because of a engine change or something, and then was fairly innocuous. He did jump up to like P5 at one point, because he was early onto the intermediates. That worked out, but then he just kind of fell down the order, I think mostly just because of Haas. I think if I'm giving Hulkenberg a B, I can't give Magnussen any worse than a C, because I just think that Haas is awful. And yeah, Hulkenberg finished ahead of him, qualified ahead of him. Yeah, that's all I have to say, really. Lando Norris, what could have been for Norris? I've said that a few times, but 7th for Norris, of course, started P2. So very good qualifying from Norris. And to be honest, in the race, McLaren kept him and Russell were the main two, kept them out at the front, and Albon, I guess, on the dry tyres for longer than they should have. And yeah, it just didn't work out. And to be fair, I mean, I kind of half put it on, it's kind of like, Sochi 2021 all over again. I kind of half put it on the team and half put it on Lando, because the team were like asking Lando, do you think you can stay out on these tyres? It doesn't look like the rain's going to last for that long. And he's like, yeah, I can stay out. He couldn't stay out. The team should have noticed that. It's not really on Lando, but I think putting it, it's a difficult one. It's definitely what could have been for Lando. I'm still going to give him a B. I think it was still a pretty decent performance. We couldn't really done much more with that strategy he was given, but it's definitely one to forget, because I think he could have been on for a podium this race for sure. Esteban Ocon, another driver who had a bit of a weak one out in Q1, which was terrible. Really not a good quali from Ocon. Strategy was a little bit off in the race as well. Of course, they put the wet tyres on. I see a lot of people really going on at, especially Alpine, for putting Ocon on the wets, being like, oh, the wets are always terrible. And I guess maybe they are, like their pace is not good, but before that red flag flew, that was wet weather tyre conditions. Whether they were quicker or not on the wets, we saw by all the offs that the intermediates were not dispersing the water. You were just aquaplaning. So I don't really have a go at Alpine too much for putting on the wets personally. It did kind of cost him though, and he was obviously quite annoyed about it, but ultimately just didn't have the pace of his teammate. I think it's a C. I think it's a C for Ocon, just not on Gasly's level at all this weekend. Who's next? Sergio Perez, another driver not on his teammate's pace. He was, of course, leading after the first couple of laps when he went on to the intermediates on lap after lap 1, but then had no pace at all and got completely swamped by everybody. Finished P4 in the end thanks to a pit lane speeding penalty. Is it a C? I almost think it might be, to be honest, because he 1.3 seconds off his teammate in qualifying. That is ridiculous. Anything more than honestly, really the gap should be like 2 or 3 tenths. Anything more than like 5 or 6 tenths and you've got an issue. He was 1.3 seconds off Max in quali. Not good enough. Not good in the race. Didn't have good pace. Made a few mistakes. Yeah, maybe a C is harsh, but I'm putting him in C. Needs to be doing better. Oscar Piastri finished P9. Not the best weekend for Piastri this weekend. He made a few pretty good moves in the race, actually. Saw a couple of good moves from him, but ultimately didn't have the pace of Norris this weekend. I think if I'm giving Norris a B, I've got to give Piastri a C. That may be a little bit harsh. Maybe I should give Norris an A and Piastri a B. I might do that, actually. I might put Norris to A, Piastri to B, because I think, Norris's was mostly the team's fault. It wasn't really his fault. So I think that's a bit more fair. Piastri didn't really do anything wrong. He just, he definitely wasn't on Lando's pace this weekend, but just not the best weekend. At least scored a couple of points. George Russell, P17 for Russell in the end. I think he did finish. He is classified here as finishing 55 seconds behind the leader. So, of course, was running very well, was leading at one point when Max came in for a pit stop after he overtook Lando. It was the slightest of contact that put him out of the race with Lando. And it was very unfortunate. I don't think that was anyone's fault. It was a racing incident. He was making pretty good moves throughout the race. So I think if I'm giving Hamilton an A, Considering Russell did much better in qualifying, I think I've got to give Russell an A as well. Really good weekend, other than that contact, which, like I said, I think it was just a racing incident. Carlos Sainz, another driver who had a really good weekend, way on top of Leclerc all weekend long. The Ferrari didn't look that great this weekend. He still managed to get a P5 finish. I think it's an A from Sainz. I think it's a really good weekend from him. One of his better weekends this year for sure. Don't think it's quite an S. If he got a podium, I would have probably given him an S. But yeah, Ferrari didn't quite have the pace. I don't think I can give him an S if he's not on the podium. But yeah, it's a very high A for Sainz. Logan Sargent, another driver, what could have been for him, of course, made it to Q3 for the first time in F1, and then crashed out in Q3, and then crashed out in the race as well. Apparently, from what James Vowles said, the Williams team principal, it was a hydraulic issue, I think, but it did kind of look like he just clipped the curb and that spun him around and put him in the wall. So, yeah, where do I put him? He did drop right back at the start of the race. I think I've got to give him a C. I'm sorry, I think I do. The crashing quali was his fault, and as much as they're saying he had a hydraulic issue in the race, he did get on the curb when he spun round. So, I think a C. To crash twice in one weekend, I think that that's not great. Lance Stroll, another driver who wasn't great, finished P11, started P11, I believe, as well. SC, there's nothing really much to say about him. He's way behind his teammate. Yeah, what else is there to say about Lance Stroll? Yuki Tsunoda, another driver, what could have been, was running, I think, as high as P4 at one point. But once again, AlphaTauri, they just completely screwed him over with strategy. They left him out there for way too long, and he just fell back and back and back, and ended up finishing P15, and had a time penalty as well for something. I can't remember what that was for, but it might have been speeding in the pit lane again, I don't know. But yeah, he was looking really good this weekend, but I think, you know what, I'm going to give him an A, because he was looking really good until that point. I don't think the penalty was anything like too dangerous or anything, so yeah, he was looking good, but the strategy was terrible by AlphaTauri. Max Verstappen, S. He didn't lead the whole race, but I mean, when you're leading the race, to be the first one to change onto intermediates is a big ask, and he was rapid once he did change onto those tyres, overtook a bunch of people, and was leading and well away. So easy win, easy S for Max. I wouldn't say easy win, but an easy S. And then Zhou Guanyu, he crashed, but he was up as high as P2, I think, at one point. And yeah, it seemed to have good pace this weekend, but ultimately he did crash. I don't think I can give him an A. I think a B. Better weekend than Bottas. And yeah, like I said, he was up in P2 at one point, thanks to the strategy. But yeah, what could have been for him? Just aquaplaned into turn one and crashed in fairly a heavy impact. But he seems to be all right. And yeah, just a bit of an unfortunate one, but it was kind of also his fault. But those conditions were very treacherous. But anyway, there we go. That is my driver ranking. Nobody lower than D this weekend. I think just because this is a very difficult race to analyze because of the chaotic weather and everything. So maybe I've been a little bit too lenient on some drivers here, but I ultimately think that on the most part, everybody did a pretty good job considering the conditions. And yeah, let me know what you think. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.